Welcome to The Snug, where we shine a soft light on difficult topics and life experiences with compassion, hope, and just the right amount of humor. So, welcome to The Snug. Vera Snow, and today Tina and I are excited to introduce a new series called Crones Unfiltered. It's a time where we're going to share and discuss hardships and life experiences that we have overcome over the years, some added humor, and perhaps even some wisdom. Tina and I have been talking about this, right, forever, for years. And now that we have kids that range from millennial to Gen Zers, we thought we would just take the time finally to bridge the gap between the generations. We are going to start today by discussing our love of dualities,
Yay.
embracing, yay, the highs and the lows, the dark and the light aspects of our life that have been instrumental in making us who we are today. And like I was telling Tina, there is a storm going on right now. I had all kinds of technical difficulty. Clearly this isn't meant to be, but we're gonna ride through. We're gonna push forward like Crones do
Amen.
and figure it out. So first of all, Tina, I think we
Yes.
should start with our Eastern European backgrounds because you and I know that this is instrumental, fundamental to who we are and how we survive in this American culture.
Yes.
So we were both raised in European households, Eastern European, even though my grandfather was from Russia, so he's Eastern European, but my parents are from Czechoslovakia, which they will argue to the death that they are Central European. But whatever. I have always felt Eastern European, and I know that that's kind of the culture I grew up in. How
Yeah.
about you?
Well, I was adopted into a family which had my adoptive mother was Polish Catholic, and my father was Romanian Orthodox. So very, very, very Eastern European cultural background.
How you start with some of those fairy tales and stories that we grew up with.
My family, and this is extended family as well. My mother had nine siblings, and my dad had 11 siblings. And so there were lots of stories that were brought down through the generations. One of the things I think that was really pervasive in my childhood was my mother's family, because they were Polish Catholic. They brought the Eastern European stuff, but they also intertwined it with Catholicism. And so there was this really interesting mix of kind of old school European Polish flavor and just Catholicism in general. We were very strict Catholics. And so one of the things that I remember very well from my childhood was how they would see signs in everything. And so if there was, particularly around certain objects, birds were a huge thing in my family. And so there was a meaning behind every kind of sighting of a bird and what happened with the bird and then what that would mean. And it was all related to spirits and death and ghosts and all that kind of thing. So, for example, if I remember one morning and it was winter, it was very cold out, but it was very sunny, and there was maybe it was a cardinal. I'm not sure what kind of bird it was, but it was a red bird. And it was just sitting in our backyard and it wouldn't go. It just sat and sat and sat. And I remember my mom saying, "Oh, mm-hmm." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And she said, "Well, there's something coming. There's a red bird in the yard." So grew up with this stuff. Blackbirds were, of course, a symbol of death and or destruction. And so blackbirds were always feared, I guess, or avoided. There was a time when a huge blackbird got into my mom's kitchen. And this was right around the time that I had an uncle in California who was fighting cancer. And he was on his last legs. And so this blackbird came into her kitchen and just sat on the kitchen sink and just sat there and looked around at everybody. And she said, "Oh, yeah, he must have passed. He's passed over." Sure enough, we got a phone call that evening, and it was just freaky, but stuff like that all the time. There were meanings behind everything. And I think that was very old school Polish, in my mind anyway, and Catholic. It was never really spooky. It was
Hmm.
just kind of factual.
It was just there, yeah,
And
always
it was
present.
always present for
Always
sure.
kind of that balancing of the two. Like, don't be too
Mhm.
happy.
My mother used to say, because suffering was a big thing in Catholicism back then. And so if you're too happy, you're not suffering enough.
Yeah,
And
something is
so,
wrong.
right. And the goal was not to find out why you were happy or just be happy. It was to find out what was wrong with you. Eh, So it was very twisted and very, very, very weird. But again, because you grew up in it, it's just natural. I mean, I would
Girl.
tell these stories to some of my friends, and they just they just thought, what is going on over there? But it was so normal.
Yeah, life, yeah. It was just the other day somebody was talking about Russians. Well, they're just they accept that they are born to suffer. That's just how it is. And when you look at Russian literature, they're jumping out of windows, they're jumping in front of trains. I mean, they're just it's the
Yeah,
way it is. So if you're
yeah,
happy, hey, there that's great. But you know what? That's not really what you're so with me too, like I remember Christmases as a kid, we'd go to these Christmas bazaars, which were bizarre for sure, and we'd go
right.
to Berwyn in Chicago, which was called Chicago. It was like a Czech ghetto, I guess you'd call it. And we'd go there, and you'd have Saint Nicholas, with his little hat, and he was the light, and then you had the devil. I mean, the devil was right next to him, and it was constantly this reminder, kids, walk the straight line. You might get coal for Christmas.
Right.
Uh,
Oh, true.
so it was just like fear. There was a lot of fear based, but it also, it had its positives, right? It kept me on my
Absolutely.
toes. It wasn't sanitized.
Yes.
Life was not sanitized. You were
No.
expecting the worst, and if you got something good along the way, yeah, you know, uh,
Right,
or
right.
you felt guilty about it, like your mom. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the guilt.
But
Just the crushing guilt. It was, you know, I mean, I remember going to confession on Saturday afternoons, and on the way there, so I would walk to the church. It was about 2.5 blocks from us. I'd walk to the church, and the whole time I'm thinking, please don't let me get hit by a car before I can go to confession, because then I'll die and I'll have these mortal sins on my soul. Well, they weren't mortal sins. They were things like I fought with my brothers and sisters, but we were taught that these were grievous sins, And so I remember that very clearly, just the whole way thinking, okay, just get me to the church, get me to the confessional, cleanse these sins, and then I'll be good. And I can walk home without fear.
Yeah, the bar is kind of low. Yeah.
The bar is very low.
We also had like these fairy tales that we read at night. Like one was called Bolognese. I'll never forget it. She was this evil witch that would steal babies and children at noon.
Oh, okay. That's
Not sure,
interesting.
not sure why, but at noon, and she'd hide them in a cave. And that's, you're hoping it didn't happen. So around noon, I remember thinking, yeah, this is the time. If it's going to
Oh.
happen, it's going to happen. It's going to be around lunchtime.
And we had Tales of Baba Yaga, which is
Yeah,
a
similar,
very
similar.
famous Eastern European folk tale about what's interesting to me as I start to learn more and more about Crohn's is that she was a hag,
Yes.
which had such a negative connotation because she was an older woman.
Yep.
And I remember we'd see pictures of her depicted in fairy tales or books, and she just scared the bejesus out of me because she was old and kind of gnarled, and
Mhm.
the connotation was she's evil because this is
Yes.
how she looked. And and so yeah, we were afraid of her. We were afraid of a lot of different things.
Yeah. And all she really was very wise
She was a
and
crone.
balanced in her dualities. Like she's just there's no bullshit.
There's no bullshit. Absolutely. Yes.
So, so another thing I'd say contributed to what
Darkness.
our darkness, our darkness, or appreciation of that is wars. So
Yeah.
we both had wars in our like we experienced wars in our family. So my parents were in World War II. They were in Europe during the Nazis and then the communists. My grandfather was actually a Kozak. So he was a white Russian that protected the Tsar. And then during the 1917 revolution, he became a wanted man. So my mother escaped like when she was 12. So they both came over here at different times. So she came over to America through a German refugee camp uh, where I remember she ate like she told me she ate oatmeal for 2 years. Like that's kind of what they did.
Oof.
So that you brought that. My dad came in the 50s during communism. So again, lots of darkness, lots of trauma.
Yeah.
And you too.
Yeah. Well, my father was in World War II as well. And what's really interesting is that, oh, excuse me, he never talked about his service. And and I'm sure there were reasons for that. But before he died, he had been an alcoholic his whole life. And so when he finally got sober after 7 tries in rehab, we actually had kind of a relationship that was okay. And so I wanted to hear more. I wanted to know the stories. Turns out that he was on what do they call it? Like a supply ship. So they'd bring goods and food and all that kind of stuff to troops in the South Pacific. And he was near Okinawa and those places. And he said that when things got really bad, their ship was converted into a hospital ship. And so they were told you need to go onto the beaches and get the wounded and the dead. And so that was what he did. And he told me there were times when it was just an arm or a leg or whatever, but they were supposed to bring all the pieces back. And I had never heard that. And I thought, okay, what does that do to a person? How do you process that? And it made me understand him a little bit more. It made me understand his alcoholism, that he was trying to escape. And then in the Vietnam War, I had 2 older brothers who one was a Marine, one was in the Navy, and they fought in Vietnam. And they came back so altered. They had done a lot of drugs while they were in the service. And so they were altered because of that, but just altered because of how horrendous it was. So yeah, that whole war thing, I think it bleeds into the generations.
Mhm.
And it's not stoic. It's something that's living and breathing, and it's a very powerful force, I think, in families.
Yeah, well, for sure. And kind of the trauma and the grief that
Yes.
just kind of lingers, again, adding to that kind of sadness that's
Yes.
ever present, that you kind of get used to it. And I felt like I kind of befriended it because, might as well
Well,
make friends with it.
it
Yeah,
becomes part of you,
true.
and so much a part of you that if you don't befriend it, I'm not sure what you do with it.
You have to kind of incorporate it or integrate it,
Yes.
because if you keep it separate, like it's just not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, then it's just kind of running away, and
Escaping.
escaping, and half of your life experience is not integrated. So then you're like half a person, I guess,
Yeah,
in a way.
true. Yes, I agree.
Um, so we touched on religion a little bit. I'll just say I had a little Catholicism in my life because my dad was Catholic, but he was kind of a half-assed Catholic, if you can do that. And so we'd go to a Czech,
Oh, many people do that. Yes.
yeah, we did went to this Czech Catholic church on holidays and just get yelled at by the priest for showing up on holidays. Um, and so, that was that. And then my mom was Eastern Orthodox, and she was that before I was born. And she one day just like she couldn't stand for those 2 or 3 hours, whatever they did for 2 or 3 hours, and she just
Right.
left. So kind of a rebel there. And so then I ended up Presbyterian. Talk about whitewashing.
How did that happen?
I don't know. My mom picked it. I think she just wanted something so different than the Easter, all the rituals. But quite frankly, because I wasn't indoctrinated like you were into the Catholic world, I was fascinated by the smells and the statues
Sure.
and the blood and all this stuff in those Catholic
Yes.
churches. But yeah, so that was my experience. Obviously, yours is much more intense.
Well, like I said before, I was raised in a very strict Polish Catholic, and you have to understand that there's also Irish Catholic. There's
Mm.
also so it's the culture tied in with the Catholicism. So each culture is going to have its own, I don't want to say take on the religion, but it's influenced by cultural things. And so I think just that being sort of the norm, and the strict Catholicism and the severe Catholicism. I remember going to church before Vatican II, and Vatican II was when they had the overhaul, and they decided that it was okay to say the Mass in English rather than Latin, that you could receive the Holy Communion by taking it in your hands rather than having it put on your tongue. It was huge. It was earth shattering because you're talking about thousands of years of tradition, and then all of a sudden, and we didn't have to wear veils in church anymore.
Mm.
So I remember that transition and how I think for a lot of people it felt like a breath of fresh air. But I remember my mom and her siblings being just horrified that these were okay now to do in the Catholic Church. And so, being raised with that 24/7, it was infused in everything, everything. It was a very powerful way to be raised because you just didn't feel like you had any kind of you couldn't have your own mind. That was not, you could not question the Catholic Church or the priests or the nuns. And I was always a very curious child. And I would ask questions, not because I was being disrespectful, but because I just wanted to know. One time in particular, I was in catechism, and we had these group of old nuns, and uh, the nun was talking about purgatory and how, if you're not quite good enough, you're not going to make it to heaven. You have to be in the waiting room for a while, which is purgatory. And she said, and if you do such and such, you get 150,000 years in purgatory. And I just that fascinated me because I thought, well, where's that formula? I've never seen that. How do you know this? And so I said, well, how do you know that? She took that as being disrespectful. And she hauled me out of catechism, went straight to the phone that was in the hall and called my mother and told her. And then when I got home, my mother didn't even ask me what had happened. She just smacked me because I had disrespected the nun. And I remember thinking, I truly wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but I wanted to know, well, can I look this up? I mean, can I find this somewhere? And that question was never answered, of course. And I just, that's the kind of thing. It was just constant. It was like, just don't ask questions. The priest is God. Do not show any disrespect. So a kid like me, a very curious kid, that was just not acceptable.
Was your story when your husband met your family?
Yes, yes.
So the Norwegian Stoic meeting.
The Stoic Norwegian Lutheran farmers meet these Polish Catholics, crazy family, uh, and the Norwegians at that time, I mean, I think they've gotten better now, but they just did not show any kind of emotion. It was very bland. And I think I brought some spice into that family, but the first time that they met, it's very traditional in my family for greetings for people to kiss on the lips. That's a very Polish thing.
Mhm.
And so the first I just was thinking, oh my God, what is going to happen here? And I remember my mother just planting one on my ex-husband's dad, and he just stood there like he was going to have to be brought to the hospital because he just did not know he just was like a stiff board. He was in shock. Basically, he was in shock.
Oh my God.
And I was just thinking, oh, couldn't you curb it? Couldn't you, reel it back just a tad? But no, that
No,
was that was how they were 1% of the time.
what's so important about the Eastern European and the darkness is it's so emotional. It's just so there's
It's
no
so base. It's the
yeah,
base human fear and darkness and
right.
death is just
It's just right. It's just that nitty gritty basic, like my favorite line with my husband Greg when we were in Europe. And he's like, the first time he was, I think he was, yeah, first time he was in Europe. He's like, everything just smells like BO. All of Europe smells like BO. And yeah, you're right. And, it's just the whole cleanliness thing that we're obsessed with here. We'll touch probably on that more later.
yeah.
It's just, there's this acceptance of just, no, it is. I mean, the bidet,
It's an acceptance of reality.
yes,
It-
you are human, we are stinky, we are, right? And like the bidet that came from France, right? And I
it-
mean, they just washed where they could. They don't shower like 3 times a day, like they do
right,
here.
right, right,
I have a story too, like in growing up, the beaches in Europe that my family grew up on, everyone's naked. That's just how it is.
right.
So when
Yeah.
I was born, And, Chicago's right by Lake Michigan, and we would go on these family vacations again with just these huge groups of Czech people.
Oh,
And
sure.
I'd be running around naked on the beach. And another thing they did with young girls is they pierced their ears at like 6 months.
Yeah,
I never remembered the pain or any of that. And,
right.
maybe it's savage to people here, but like it's what you did. And you put in these very they're nice gold earrings. Mine had a little ruby, and they're like kind of clipped permanently. So they don't fall out. I mean, you can take
Okay,
them off, but they're in there because you're 6 months old. So like, they invested in these earrings.
sure.
And so I'm running around the beach naked and I've got short hair because I'm 6 months old. And somebody goes, "Oh, what a cute little boy." And my mom looks right at him and says, "Don't you see she has earrings?" And I'm
I mean,
naked.
was that part of the tradition because they
Yes.
wanted to see you as a girl?
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's something like, I don't know, like maybe Native Americans do something to their kids when they're born, or I don't know. It was just a thing. And what I
Ah,
really appreciate is that I never had to go get my ears pierced. Like it was never
yeah,
this fight that Americans talk about they have with their families, their mothers, their dads. I mean,
right,
they were there and so
right.
when it was time for earrings later on, like, yeah, it's all done. So
Yeah.
I
And
don't
I think
know.
that that speaks to the greater American, again, this sort of sanitization, this, making such a big deal out of things that in European traditions just are not that big of a deal. It's like you pierce your baby's ears, whatever. But
Yeah.
again, because here it's like this rite of passage and you have to be old enough to decide and all that kind of stuff. Very
Yeah.
individualistic. Yes.
Yes. And very petty and just, yeah, like you're up in your head all the time here.
Right,
Just
right.
it's just a constant head trip. So funerals. Let's talk a little bit about
Oh,
that because talk about darkness.
oh my
Tell us
God.
about
And
your
and the
funeral
darkness
experiences.
the darkness was again just so incorporated.
Yeah.
It was not, I mean, I went to a lot of funerals growing up. And one of the big things, and again, I don't know if this was so much Polish Catholic as it was our family, but I think there was probably Eastern European stuff there. One of the big things was to take a picture of your family around the dead body. This was very common. And I remember I had some of these pictures until years ago, and I finally got rid of them. I thought, why am I hanging on to these? Um, and so, yeah, it was treated as very natural. And yes, it's a dead body, but come on, everybody, let's take a picture. It was so, I mean, other families would think, what, what? Because that's so sanitized now in American life,
Oh
the
yeah.
whole funeral thing. And so, but this was very common. I don't remember a funeral where we didn't do that, unless the casket was closed.
You also have the wailing, right? The women, the Romanian.
When my grandfather died, he went to a Romanian Orthodox church. And so when he died, that's where his funeral was. And we had gone a few times because they have, in the Orthodox Church, their Christmas and Easter's are always a week later. And so we'd always do Christmas and Easter with them and then go to their church. And I didn't understand anything. It was all in Romanian. It was very old school. Um, the women were in the back and we weren't allowed up to the front near the priest's altar. And anyway, so when my grandfather died, there were women there who were parishioners who their job was to wail and weep over the corpse. And this was very ritualistic. And at the time, that was the first time I'd ever seen that. And it was just blew my mind, blew my mind. We didn't even have that in the Catholic Church. So this was, again, talk about base. This is you're bringing people in to make sure that this person is mourned correctly. And that means wailing and weeping and heaving themselves over the casket. And I just had that made such an impression on me as a young child because it was like, wow, I thought Catholics and my traditions were old school, but this was really old school stuff. And again, fascinating, fascinating stuff.
And was it contagious? Like, was it also to allow people to then express emotion?
Well, what's really interesting about that is that the people were naturally expressing emotion because they were Romanians.
Ah,
It
yes.
was
Because,
it wasn't, they didn't need to be led. There was already weeping and
yeah.
wailing going on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I guess this was just to enhance it, or I'm not sure what. But contrast that to the funerals I went to on my ex-husband's side, where you kept that inside. I do remember one funeral that it was his cousin, his first cousin, who was very young when he died of brain cancer.
Mm,
And so going to this funeral was so hard because people were actually breaking down
mm,
and crying because it was so traumatic. And I just remember looking at his dad who was weeping, and I'd
mm,
never seen him show very much emotion at all.
mm-hmm.
And it really hit me because I thought, okay, they can't keep a lid on this because it's just too sad.
Yeah.
But in my experience growing up, you let loose at funerals. You weren't thinking, oh my God, I have to control myself. None of that.
Right. Right. It's yeah, there's this reverence. You just want to give the attention that it deserves. The sadness.
Yes, yes.
This person has died. It is
Right,
sad. Um,
right.
so with my family, my mom's funeral was also in Berwyn in the Czech ghetto, and again, it was just packed, and it was beautiful. I was in shock myself, but there's
Sure.
just so much emotion going on, and
Right.
stories, people coming up to me in the line and just telling these stories about my mom. It
Yes.
it was
Yeah.
just so healing to have that. Um,
Yes.
and when my grandmother died, she was in Prague, and my husband and I were on our way to go see her, but she died before we got there. So
Mm.
Greg and I were at the funeral, and boy, that was also something. And she was cremated. And one of the things when you went to the crematorium in Prague, you would watch the coffin go into the flames.
Wow.
You would see it, and they'd be playing Ave Maria, like her favorite
Oh,
hymn, and the
I'm gonna start
flames,
bawling right now.
yeah,
Oh my
are
gosh.
engulfing the casket. I mean, it's something.
Yeah.
Um, and and then the feast afterward, there's like lard on lard and bread, you just spread it on. And
Oh yeah.
my husband Greg's like, oh my God, this is like one of the best things I've ever had. It's just like, you know what? And
Yeah.
she did not have any special diets. She liked everything, ate everything, drank her wine, and she made it to 86. And quite frankly, I don't even know what she really died of.
Probably old age.
It might have been.
Yeah.
It might have been. I don't think there was really any cancer. I don't know. She was done.
That's so
So,
interesting. You're
yeah.
talking about the funeral food because
Yes.
that was something that my ex-husband always commented on when we would go down to his hometown for funerals. There was always a little lunch afterwards.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
But it was very bland. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, where's the food? I mean, what it was, it was so bland and white. And then in my family, back then, now they can't do it now, but back then everybody would bring something to the church and then the church would serve it. And so everybody always made their best food or what they were known for. The food was crazy good. And I remember him like saying, who made this? And I said, well, everybody. That's what you do. And he always commented how the funeral food was so delicious in my family. And it was, but it was tradition. You weren't going to have little sandwiches and a little potato salad and,
Yes.
no.
And it's made with probably so much emotion, the food. I mean, that makes it even better.
Well, and people expected, like if it was Aunt so and so, and she was famous for her cabbage rolls or
Oh,
whatever,
sure, sure.
you were expecting that. You knew that you were looking forward to it, as bizarre as it sounds. During that funeral, you could smell the food being warmed up from the kitchen in the basement of the church, and it was just like, all right,
Oh my
let's
God.
move it along here. We got to get to the lunch. So
Well,
funny.
so kind of wrapping our pilot up here, we've introduced kind of ourselves, where we come from, where our kind of our prone talk is going to go to light and dark, embracing those two, um, and and just kind of what talking about the need for both, the integration of both. And I just it's been a struggle. I've been living, I'm in America. I wasn't even born in Prague. I was born in Chicago, but when you grow up like that, it's like you got one foot in the door in Europe,
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just it's been a struggle. And so, this kind of this cookie cutter houses, the kind of the bleach and the sterilization of everything in this country is just really hard.
Yeah.
um, Really hard. And I feel like
Yeah.
our kids, I don't know if the anxiety that is all over this country is part of that they're, everyone's spinning in their heads, that they're not really, what am I trying to say, Tina? Living, breathing, moving in their bodies, in their reality, and their accepting that things aren't always going to be peachy. You're not always going to win. In
And
fact,
you're not always going to be happy
and oh, perfect,
because you're
perfect, Tina.
supposed to be happy in America. You know,
Yes.
we're taught from
Yes.
day one that we're the best country, the richest country,
Yeah.
this, that, the other thing. And I also find it interesting when we're talking about this because we are of a different generation than our children.
Well, that
And
too.
I think we had the upbringing by parents in the previous generation,
Yeah.
which was much more traditional, much more um, laid out, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah.
And I think for kids in our kids' age group, my daughter is 33, and we've had conversations about this a lot. And I think that part of their anxiety, if you will, is not having a finite place. I
Mm.
mean, when we were being raised, you knew what was expected of you. You knew that you had to do that. You never questioned what was my responsibility or what was my direction because you were taught it your whole lives. And I think then we as parents sort of rebelled against that and said, wait a minute, I don't want to put that on my kids. I want
Mhm.
them to be individuals and I want them to choose for themselves.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that maybe that leads to them being a bit directionless
Yes. Yes.
and which creates anxiety.
Absolutely. And we've talked about this, that like Downton Abbey, I'm convinced all these British shows, people, Americans are just craving structure, right?
Yes,
It may not be right, like it may not be fair that
right,
downstairs and downstairs and upstairs and up, but that's just the reality, right? So they made the
right.
best of it, and they know
Well,
they're,
and that's
and
yeah.
they make
And
the
I
best out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's how we were raised. It's you're not a princess. You're not, I mean, my mother would tell me all the time, who do you think you are?
Mm,
If I showed any kind of individuality or pride,
yeah,
or it was, that was just shot down
yeah,
because they were coming again from much more collectivistic cultures
right.
where it's not about you, it's about we, and it's about us. And you reflect on the family. It's not just about you. And I think that that's in stark contrast to when we look at millennials or Gen Xers because they're constantly trying to find themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's very anxiety provoking.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, what we are asking whoever's listening, we're asking for viewer comments. We're asking for, especially young people, what can we talk about? What can we, what are some
What
topics?
wisdom can we impart on you
What can we
that
try
would
and
help
yes,
you?
what can we try and give you moving
Yeah,
forward? I don't know. We've been through a lot. We've survived. Not only have we survived, we've thrived. Somehow we've become individuals despite not being raised necessarily to be individuals because, right,
right,
that really wasn't how it was set up. But
right.
somehow we did it and we continue to do it because it's a constant thing.
As a crone, as crones, we can bring to people, not only will you survive all of this that seems insurmountable in the here and now, but it will make you a better person. And as you age, that perspective just deepens and deepens and deepens.
A lot of times you hear this rise above it. Well, sure, but rising, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not integrating it. You're not accepting what happened that is maybe not
Right.
so great. You're just rising, but it's a kind of a superficial rising.
Right. Well, it's almost
Yeah.
it's almost trying to erase the
Erase.
experience
Yeah.
because it's not
Yes.
comfortable, because it is
Yes.
dark, because it
Yes.
is something to put in the past. It's done and I don't
Yeah.
need to focus on it anymore. Well, you and I both know that that always comes out sideways when you
Oh,
try
it's
to
coming.
suppress.
It's coming for you. Yeah. One way or the
The,
other.
the
Yeah.
darkness is coming for you
Mhm.
and welcome it because that is what continues to enrich your life. I mean, it's the things that we've been through, the things that we've gotten over, the deaths that we've had, the I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
And you only get that from aging and from wisdom. And I just wish I had had somebody, I think, when I was in my 30s, who wasn't preaching at me about this kind of stuff, but who would advise me if I had questions. And I think that's what I feel like in a way my purpose is in life right now. It's to help people who just don't quite get what's going on with them or they are struggling. I don't have all the answers, none of us do. But I think for people who are struggling, just having someone listen and acknowledge that, you know what? Life is hard. It is hard.
So again, thank you for whoever's listening. Send this podcast to your young people, Tina.
Yeah,
We
I
want
will.
some feedback on what we can discuss next.
Yeah.
Subscribe, comment, share, help us build this community, and we will see you next time.
If you're too happy, you're not suffering enough.